People ruin their own lives, and most often they are not at all aware of what they are doing and what consequences may follow because of their actions. And most often, betrayal is followed by punishment, and very cruel punishment. It had rained all night, and the morning showed no sign of it letting up. Charlestown was flooded with water and mud from vehicles coming in from the surrounding areas. Hillier was really glad he had brought his boots with him, an impromptu decision right before heading to McDonald's for a quick breakfast. He had also remembered his umbrella and coat, but those were essentials at this time of year. Given the overnight downpour, he was prepared for their use. The previous day's stakeout had been a failure, but he wasn't too upset about it. At that moment, he was just enjoying the drive with the windows down, taking in the fresh, rain-cleansed air. That is, until he got stuck in slow-moving traffic for an hour, passing a 3-car accident caused by the slippery conditions, which clogged up the 2-lane road. By the time he arrived in Charlestown, his mood was less than ideal. He went directly to the local police station and showed his badge to the desk sergeant, who straightened up upon seeing it. The sergeant made a call, and a minute later a similarly worn-out detective in a disheveled suit appeared, holding a plastic cup of what Hillier suspected was terrible coffee. The detective gestured for Hillier to follow and held the door open for him. "Detective Hillier?" "I'm Detective David Hansen. How can we assist our metropolitan colleague today?" Hansen's voice, though tired, was sharp and precise, and his choice of words was enough to raise an eyebrow. His voice seemed out of place, coming from his face. "Nice to meet you, Detective Hansen. Well, I'm not exactly here on official business. I'm on a personal mission, following up on a hunch. I'm hoping you can assist." Hillier was led to a seat next to a tidy desk with only a computer and phone and almost nothing else. He raised an eyebrow at the sight. A cop's desk is never that clean. Hansen noticed him looking and said, "Everything's digital now, Chief. Papers for the trees, so what can we help you with?" "Joe Sullivan," Hillier responded, skipping the pleasantries. Hansen winced. "And what has Charlestown's top Boy Scout gotten himself into this time?" he asked. "So he's from around here?" "Guess my hunch was right," Hillier smiled. "Oh yeah, he's local. The folks here treat him like some sort of woodland spirit, shielding him from everything. He was involved in an incident a while back where a kid ended up dead. One of the kids turned on him, but somehow he managed to come out of it looking like a saint around here. I once had to drag him out of a bar, completely plastered. It was pure luck I was there to see him take on a couple of redneck jerks who were bothering one of the girls doing karaoke. He really took those guys down, though in the most awkward way possible, and I had to get him out of there before he seriously hurt himself. He even tried to take a swing at me, so I locked him up to let him sober up. He was very apologetic the next day." "Sounds like our guy," Hillier said. "So what do you need?" Hansen asked. "Just trying to locate him. He turned up dead in our area, killed while defending a woman from a mugging." Hansen set his drink down. "Damn. That's rough. People around here won't take that well. Did you catch the killer?" Hillier frowned. "Number the bastard got away. We know who he is and have his 2 accomplices. The woman was defending herself pretty well and took down 2 of them, but the other lowlife was behind her, pulled a knife, and that's when Joe stepped in. He took him on, got stabbed, and that was that." "Oh man, what a mess," Hansen sighed. "So yeah, I'm just trying to trace where he came from. Seeing if anyone needs to be notified, and honestly, I'm just really curious about this guy. He seems like a decent person who's had a rough time. Do you know where he stayed?" Yeah, we had to drop him off there after the drunk tank incident. He lives in one of the cabins at Trolley Fields, just outside of town. I'll give you the address. Hillier leaned back as Hansen started typing on the computer, thinking to himself, "It's always nice when a hunch proves true." He thought about texting April to let her know he'd found Joe's place, but decided to wait until he had actually been there. He felt it was right to inform any survivors first. Well, I've done it again. To the challenge, dear friends. I'm a married man once more, and it feels amazing. This time I got it right, with the perfect woman I can finally trust again. Penny looked absolutely stunning today. Manny even came into town to be my best man. It was great to see him since I haven't seen him since the Cambridge event. He's doing well, selling Harleys in Wisconsin, and he looked fantastic. It was so good to catch up. Last time we talked, I was a mess, but he mentioned how much better I seemed to be doing. We're at the airport now, heading for a week in Bermuda. I'm eager to see what Penny has packed for our honeymoon. I thought about sending a picture of us to Tara, but that would be petty, and she probably wouldn't care anyway. She made it clear she was done with me. Well, to hell with her. The best revenge is living well, and by God, I'm going to do just that. Even Marianne showed up at the wedding, which was a surprise. She cleaned up well. I was surprised to see her there with her husband. She was watching me closely, but I don't care. This is my day, well, mine and Penny's. Hillier drove into the muddy lot at Trolley's Fields and parked in the exact spot April had used the day before. He was wearing heavy boots, so he didn't have to slog through the mud like April had, which was fortunate given that the rain had left the ground soaked and churned. He hurried into the guest services cottage and found a setup almost identical to what April had encountered. Except this time, the old, overweight man was sound asleep in one of the armchairs by the fire. His hands were resting on his belly, with a half-empty bottle of Johnny Walker and an empty glass on the table, beside him. Hillier could smell the man's breath from the door, and it was unpleasant. Hillier deliberately banged the door to wake the man, but when that failed, he walked over to the desk and rang the bell several times. This approach was equally ineffective. Hillier waited a few moments to see if this remarkable specimen of manhood was actually the desk clerk, and when no one appeared, he shook the man until he roused from his alcoholic stupor. The man toppled off the chair, landed on the floor, swore, and began to push himself up. He then stood, looked around with bleary, partially open eyes, muttered something, and shuffled over to the desk, completely disregarding Hillier's presence. Once he was behind the desk, looking a bit more alert and using both hands to prop himself up, he mumbled, "What can I do for you, sir?" "Need a cabin for the weekend?" Hillier simply stared at him and said, "Joe Sullivan." "Which cabin is his?" "And why should I tell you?" the man responded, attempting to appear aloof but only coming off as pitiful. Hillier flashed his badge. The man struggled to focus on it but eventually said, "Fine. Cabin 37. Seems like he's quite the popular guy lately. 2 people looking for him in just 2 days." Hillier was about to leave when he stopped and turned. "2? Yeah, a hooker was here the other day. Pretty girl. I wouldn't mind having some of that myself. She might still be around. Apparently Joe's quite the catch if you get my drift." The man's suggestive hip movements made Hillier feel nauseous. Hillier's eyes narrowed. "Blonde? Well put together, driving a convertible? Yeah, that sounds like her. Very cute. I can just imagine." Hillier snorted and walked out of the cabin. April Carlyle was here. She had found him before Hillier had. How cheeky of her. There would definitely be words. Hillier parked next to April's Nissan Z, indicating that she was still around. He trudged up to the cabin's front door, scraping the mud off his boots on the porch before entering without knocking. Inside, April was seated by the fireplace where only a few embers remained. The cabin had a faint aroma of coffee, and she was wrapped in a blanket. A black Labrador at her feet was now barking furiously at Hillier. Hillier paused in the doorway, unsure of his next move. Should he grab his gun? Was the dog a threat? He glanced briefly. Despite the dog's uproar, it was merely pacing back and forth. Hillier's gaze met April's, who returned his look with a faint smile. He noticed her makeup was heavily smeared, with mascara streaked down her cheeks. She had clearly been crying. She looked at the dog and said sharply, "Max, quiet." The dog ceased barking and looked at her with questioning eyes. "Go to your bed, Max. Now," she ordered firmly. The dog trotted over to a large cushion near the stairs leading to the loft, lay down, and kept its eyes on Hillier. Hillier raised his hands and asked, "Is it safe for me to come in?" April offered him another faint smile and replied, "It took me hours to find the right way to tell him." Got it eventually. Joe would never have a dog he hadn't trained himself. Hillier stepped inside and sat on the small couch next to the easy chair, observing her closely. "So, you found this place first? Impressive. I'd be interested to hear how you managed it." April abruptly stood up, threw back the blanket, and walked over to Hillier. She bent down, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. Hillier was completely stunned. She was incredibly attractive and clearly not from his circle, which made this moment even more amazing. When she finally pulled away and looked down at him, he remained silent, stunned by the many questions that were running through his head. "Ambrose, I know this is unexpected, but I need you to carry me to bed. Right now. You are welcome. I need to take my mind off what I'm feeling right now. What I've read breaks my heart, and I can't take it anymore. Take me upstairs and make love to me, please." Hillier faced a dilemma. Should he comply and offer her temporary relief, risking potential consequences and the possibility that she would resent him for taking advantage of the situation? Or should he politely decline, hoping to preserve his moral purity and that she would understand it later? In the end, he decided to rely on his instincts. He hadn't been intimate in months, and after all, he was a man. He stood up and she took his hand, leading him upstairs to a small bedroom in the attic. There was a queen-size bed in the room, covered with a cover made of artificial animal skin. The room looked cozy and clean. They did what they needed to do. And then it dawned on him. Unprotected intimacy was a risky business. His eyes widened at the realization. April noticed his concern and quietly reassured him, "Don't worry. I'm safe. I'm sure you are too." Hillier relaxed, leaning back on the bed to catch his breath, and April watched him from under half-closed eyelids. Later that day, after another round, April got up, wrapped herself in a sheet, and went downstairs to make more coffee. Halfway up the stairs, she bumped into Max, who was watching her and whimpering softly. Noticing the lack of dog hair upstairs, April assumed that he was forbidden to be in the bedroom, but he decided to test the boundaries of what was allowed with new guests. She sent him back down, and he obeyed, lowering his tail. She made coffee just as Hillier appeared, tucking his shirt into his trousers. "Are we going to talk about this?" "What is it?" he asked cautiously, sitting down on one of the two chairs at the small breakfast table. April smiled and handed him a cup of hot coffee. "No, it was just for once. I hope you understand that. There is no relationship here. I needed you. I hope you're not upset. We don't love each other because we slept together once." "Twice," Hillier muttered, sipping scalding coffee. "It was twice." April smiled softly and sat down opposite him. "I'm sorry. Is it an important day for you?" she teased. "Shut up," Hillier replied evenly, although his smile betrayed his true feelings. April chuckled. "Speaking from experience, you're not half bad. If you're not having repeat performances in an afternoon too often, then you might need to get back into the game, my boy. You have the potential to make a woman quite happy, you know." Hillier raised an eyebrow but didn't ask the obvious question. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "So what's next?" "What upset you so much?" he asked, trying to sound concerned. He didn't want to leave April in the same state he found her in, but he needed answers. Joe kept a journal. It was a task he picked up from his therapist. Reading it is devastating. The man was so mistreated by everyone he trusted and loved, Ambrose. "I honestly don't know how he didn't just end it all. He was betrayed by the military, 2 wives, both of whom cheated on him in the worst ways, and even by the family of kids he saved from drowning. And what did he do? He tried to help others instead, and now he's dead, having saved me from being stabbed. The guy wasn't just any ordinary person. He was like Jesus Christ himself returned to earth. I came here seeking answers, and instead found a sea of guilt to add to the ocean of it I already carry." April ran her fingers through her hair. "I just can't get over what these women did to him. The second one is even worse than the first. She knew what he had already endured and went ahead with it anyway. Can I take a look at this?" "It might be evidence, April. I may need to seize it. If there's any wrongdoing documented." April remained composed, her gaze fixed firmly away from the book on the side table. "No," she replied calmly. Hillier's eyebrows raised. "No?" he echoed. "April, this is practically a crime scene." "But it isn't one, and you're out of your jurisdiction, so don't get all high and mighty." Hillier shrugged. "Sure, but one phone call." He left the implication hanging. "Ambrose, I'm okay with you taking the journal, but not just yet. There are things I need to do with it first. I have plans. If you have any concern for this man, let me handle it. I can do things you can't, things that need to be done. There needs to be retribution and restitution, and I can ensure that happens. Legally." She emphasized the last word. "Let me take care of it. Legally. Are you sure about that?" "Oh yes, absolutely. Ethically, it's off the charts, though you might argue it's highly moral. These people need a dose of humility, and they need to face the consequences of their actions. But legally, definitely. I need this. I need to do this. Joe needs this." April could see that Hillier was already starting to waver. She imagined that her appeals and their time together that afternoon were having an impact on him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, deep in thought. Finally, he said abruptly, "What the hell? It's not official anyway. Go ahead, get it out of your system. But I want to read this soon, okay? I want to know this guy too." April smiled, jumped up and ran to Hillier to hug him. When she did, she felt that he wanted another portion. "Again?" "You, boy," she said with admiration. "For an older guy, you're really not far behind." "To hell with you," he chuckled, realizing that the rest of the day could turn out differently depending on his next move. But instead he decided to be tactful. He's had fun, twice, and now it's time to be a gentleman. "Come on, sit down. I can't let you take advantage of me again." April raised her eyebrows, but she came over and sat down where he pointed. "So, what's next?" "What is it?" he asked. "First of all, I'm buying this place." "Who are you?" Hillier asked in surprise. "Yes, Joe bought it cheap. It was in such poor condition that Ted, the nice guy you met at the entrance, sold it to Joe for $10,000 with the right to lifetime exclusive use. The deal was that Joe would fix it and maintain it. You wouldn't know it, but Joe kept all the houses in excellent condition. He needed a place where his ex-wives couldn't find him. I suppose if I offer $15,000, Ted will be paid twice and he won't lose anything." Hillier laughed. "A smart move. I wish I'd thought of that myself." "I don't think you fully grasp the situation, Ambrose. He wasn't hiding because they wanted something from him. He was hiding because they wouldn't leave him alone. Tara, his first love, finally came to realize what she had done to him and kept trying to make amends, not understanding that there's no way to repair something like that. Her desperate need for self-forgiveness led her to relentlessly pursue Joe. And being the nice guy he was, he couldn't make her stop. The fact that he was still in love with her made it even harder. On top of that, he couldn't understand why she had acted the way she did. Her explanations seemed to come from a different reality, and he had no context to grasp them. He blamed himself, but he didn't even know what he was supposed to change. He needed to escape, to retreat and heal in solitude forever. So he found this place, where he could remain anonymous and be alone. Jesus, this guy's life. It's all documented in the journal, and from what I've learned from finding this place. I've met both of his wives, each a piece of work, let me tell you. His therapist, his old landlord, the whole gamut. Yeah, I was going to ask how you got here before me, Miss Therapist. The therapist, damn him. What is it you really do? Let's just say I work for an agency, and leave it at that, okay? No questions, no lies. Hillier snorted but decided not to press further. It wasn't worth the trouble. So, you've got yourself a new weekend cottage. What's next? What about that amazing dog of yours? April's eyes sparkled. She glanced over at Max, who lifted his head from his cushion when he saw her look. Max and I are sticking together. He's my new boyfriend. Does your apartment allow dogs? That's a peculiar question. No, they don't. But you know what? April tilted her head at him. I think I've just decided to buy a house. My lease is up next month anyway, and I've been thinking about it. Yes, it's time to settle down and buy a house. Why not? You'd buy a house just to have a dog? April's eyes flashed with intensity. No, I'd buy a house to have Joe's dog, she said quietly. Hillier took a step back. All right, so what's the plan now? April smiled, the tension easing. Well, first a shower, then I need to make Mr. Universe an offer, see some people, and organize a funeral. I think I may have met someone. I didn't expect this. I still feel like myself. Hurt. 2 years have passed, and I haven't really talked to anyone. Marianne encouraged me to date, but to be honest, I felt like it wasn't like that. Most of the women I meet are either married or looking for someone who doesn't look like me, and it becomes clear within the first 10 minutes. Maybe I've always been like this. It's hard to judge when you look from the inside. Anyway, I'm cruising around Alaska, watching whales. At the bar, I made some sarcastic remarks about how, judging by the height of some of the women on the ship, we didn't really have to come to Alaska. We could just stay by the pool. It's a little bittersweet, but it's still funny. There was a very cute blonde sitting there laughing and chewing on a waffle iron, and she was making eyes at me. Me, Mr. Loser. She is incredibly attractive, petite, fit, and her name is Penny. As a result, we talked all day at the bar. I didn't even feel the effect of the drink. Now she is lying next to me on the bed and snoring softly. One thing is for sure. The next time I book a cabin, I'll take it with a king-size bed. But the closeness. Oh my God, this woman is a miracle. I've never experienced anything like this before. 3 times in one night. It was an unexpected turn of events, that's for sure. I'm not going to question this lucky chance. April has had a few hectic days. The negotiations for the sale of the cottage took much longer than she expected, and the disgusting owner demanded more than she was willing to pay. He constantly hinted at hangouts that made her feel sick. As a result, She had to pay $17,000, but she got the right to lifetime exclusive use of the cottage. Ted regretted only two things: that he hadn't slept with April and that he'd lost a maintenance worker. She brought Max to her house, and despite the fact that it is forbidden to keep pets in the apartment complex, she managed to bribe the doorman to turn a blind eye to this for the next month. At work, she talked to the research and development department, which confirmed her suspicions. Aaron Glasso was not the son of Mark Glasso, but Joe Sullivan. The results of the DNA analysis from Joe's body and the sample she received left no room for doubt. April wondered how Mark hadn't noticed this obvious discrepancy when she first saw Aaron and Mark together. At the end of the day, she knocked on the door of Penny and Mark Glasso's apartment. She timed it so that Mark would be home by then, or should have been, and Penny met her at the door, who recognized her immediately. "Mark! This is the lady from the legal service who handles the will." Penny smiled and motioned for her to come in. April pushed open the door, causing Penny to recoil. "Hey, you didn't have to push so hard," Penny said, glaring at her. "And you don't have to act like a disgusting easy girl either, Penny, but we're here." There was a stunned silence. What? What did you just say?" "I called you a disgusting girl of easy virtue, Penny. Now sit down before I make you." I think you should leave." Penny stammered, looking very upset. "What's going on here?" Mark asked, coming into the room and looking from April to Penny. "She's insulting me, Mark. He calls me a girl of easy virtue." Mark stared at April, who just shrugged and said, "Well, that's right. You know that. You married her and slept with her for almost a year working for her husband, who was unaware of anything. You're a real jerk yourself. Let's be honest, you two are worth each other." Mark's eyes widened as he took a step toward April, clearly furious and ready to fight back. "What the hell makes you think that you can come to my house and talk to me like that? What are you going to do?" April cut him off, ignoring his anger. "Are you going to hit me, Mark? You're just a pathetic coward who can't even find his own woman. Instead, you break into someone else's marriage, destroy it, and take advantage of their business. What kind of man does that? Oh yes, a man like you is a narrow-minded, manipulative jerk with a fake smile and a disgusting attitude. What a treasure you are. You must be very proud of me, Penny." Mark lost his temper and rushed at April. She anticipated this movement and allowed one of his hands to lower her body. When he did, she pressed his palm to her with her left hand, and with the other grabbed his little finger and pulled back. Although she didn't break it, Mark was forced to bend under the pressure, struggling to keep his arm raised. April twisted his finger until Mark was on the ground, and then hit him on the coffee table. Fortunately, it wasn't glass. She released him, and he staggered to his feet, breathing heavily. "Penny, you might want to take some napkins to wipe your husband's blood. Take more in case he decides to try something else." "Who the hell are you?" Mark asked, breathing through his mouth as Penny tried to wipe his face. April sank into the couch, flashing them a cold smile before launching into her message. "I'm the angel of vengeance. I'm the dark avenger, here to bring retribution for what you did to Joe Sullivan. This moment has been inevitable, and now it's here. I'm here, and you need to sit down and keep quiet while your little worlds crumble. You want to challenge me with Viola C? I've already proven I won't hesitate to retaliate, so sit down and listen, or don't. It's irrelevant. I'm here in place of Joe Sullivan, and while he might have let you continue your pathetic tale of betrayal, I'm not as forgiving. Pay attention, because your lives as you know them are over." Penny's mouth opened and closed in shock as she glanced at Mark, who was still trying to manage his bleeding nose. They both stood there, unsure of what to do. "I said sit down." Penny obeyed, while Mark stood with fury in his eyes, his hands clenched into fists, unable to act. Eventually, he sat down next to Penny, still gingerly touching his nose. "Now, where do we begin? Penny, you're a worthless gold-digging a girl of easy virtue. Don't argue. We all know it's true. Let's start with that. So you decided to betray Joe with this equally contemptible piece of trash? How did it all begin? Why did it start? What was Joe lacking that made you seek this out?" Penny looked back at Mark and then at Penny, clearly upset. "Stop staring at him, Penny. You'll soon understand why you need to stop listening to what Mark is saying. Just answer the question." Mean I needed more. More than what? Everything. Joe was a wonderful and kind man, and he had a business, but it was obvious that things were not going the way he had hoped. He didn't want to take business from Mercano, and they dominate the local market. He was just making ends meet. Then I met Mark, and it became clear that he was on the rise. He doubled Joe's business in a month. In just a month. Mark was who it all happened to be. He loved parties. Joe never did that. He was into intimacy. I realized that pretty quickly. He treated me the way I wanted to be treated. Joe put me on a pedestal. Mark made love to me on this pedestal. Do you have any idea how great it was to have both? To be loved by Joe and desired by Mark? But I knew I had to make a choice. I'm sorry for Joe, I really am. He was a good guy, but he was never going anywhere. He sold me a dream, and I returned it because it turned out to be not what it seemed. Penny began to defend herself, as people do when they are taken at their word, and they try their best to justify themselves with unconvincing excuses. April looked at her and said, "Let's be honest. Calling you anything other than a girl of easy virtue would be a disservice. And as a girl of easy virtue, you didn't do your job very well. Selling yourself and your marriage for this?" She gestured around the cluttered apartment. "Making ends meet? You are welcome. It doesn't seem like there was anything more between you than what you and Joe had. Did you stay with Mark because he's well off? Did that attract you? Why didn't you move, Penny? It's your habit, right? If you're missing something, you move on. So what's keeping you here?" Penny's gaze darted to the bedroom door. "Oh, yes, Aaron, I should have guessed. You're staying for the baby, instead of Dad. But tell me, Penny, because I really wonder if Mark knows that Aaron is not his son, that he's actually Joe's son, that you are so cunning that you lied to Aaron's real father and claimed that this was not the case, showing what a malicious and deceitful person you really are. Did Mark know about this? Or did you manage to deceive him as well?" Penny turned to Mark, who was now staring at her in horror. "That's not true, honey. You know I've been tested. I told you I sent an email to Joe. Aaron is yours," she pleaded, trying to find some sign of understanding on Mark's face. He just stared at her. "Of course, this is not true. What nonsense. Are you really going to believe her, Mark? A liar who has lied once remains a liar forever. Here, you can see for yourself." April tossed a stapled document onto the coffee table and gestured toward it. "Here you go, a complete DNA analysis from samples of Aaron and Joe. It shows a 99.99% probability of paternity. If you don't believe it, get your own test and see for yourself. I can't understand how anyone could miss it. Surely you remember what Joe looked like? Aaron doesn't resemble you at all, Mark. I can see that. Why can't you?" Mark glanced from Penny to April and reached for the document. Penny interrupted, pleading, "Mark, no, it's not what you think. Honestly, babe, it's not. Aaron is your son. You raised him." "So you knew. You... Shit, a girl of easy virtue. I thought he was mine. I thought that was part of the reason we got married. Jesus... ... Mark seemed to collapse as he read the document. Well, it's out in the open now, Penny. Want to explain yourself? Now's as good a time as any. I had to say it. I needed Joe out of the picture. We needed a fresh start. Mark, he's your child. Can't you see that? Who cares who his biological father was? We're a family. We're together. We're for each other. Can't you see that? April laughed. Oh, yes, a family that lies to each other. Wait, what's the rest of that saying? Penny shot April a look of pure anger. Oh, don't get all pouty. We're not done here. I honestly don't know how you could do that to Joe. I mean, that's just damn evil. What did he ever do to you that you'd lie to him like that? Take away the one thing he could have always claimed as his? Do you understand what you did? Penny looked away and said, What he didn't have, he would never miss. I had to do it. Mark and I needed it. I wasn't even sure it wasn't Mark's anyway. What was the point of making a fuss about it? He accepted it wasn't his, and we were all fine. Wow, just wow. You really deserve what's coming your way. But it's Mark's turn first. First, this. April took out her phone and made a call. After waiting through 2 rings, she said, Dermot? How's it going? No, I'm almost finished. I need a favor, so thanks for letting me call your personal line. Who do we know at the Treasury? Oh, David Johnson. Right, I remember him. He does owe us, doesn't he? Deanna is exactly what he needs, no doubt. But here's what I need, a forensic IRS audit. Yes, the thorough kind. We need it conducted on Glasso Design. That's GLASSO, based in Aspen Hill. Got it? Great, thanks, Dermot. She kept her gaze fixed on Mark the entire time, who stared back at her with a blank expression. Once she finished, he said, Haven't you done enough? First I find out my kid isn't mine because of that woman, and now I'm hit with an IRS audit. Oh, is my little baby upset? We can't have that, can we? We need to make you really upset, so let's do this. April rummaged in her purse and pulled out another thick paper folder full of documents. She tossed it on the coffee table next to the first document. At the same time, several photos fell out of it. Penny reached for one of them, but Mark, seeing what it was, shouted, No, and tried to grab them. Penny was quicker and, confused, picked up a photo of Mark having fun with some girl. She discarded this photo and picked up another one. Although the images were blurry, the content was unmistakably recognizable. She looked at April in shock, then at Mark. What is it, Mark? What's it? Is that Melissa? Yes, this is Melissa, Mark's personal assistant. As far as we can tell, this has been going on for some time, Penny. Obviously, you're not very good at household chores. Not a good idea for a man who doesn't hesitate to take someone else's wife. Oh, and by the way, she's married, she has a child, and another one is on the way. Is it possible that Mark could be the father of their child? What do you think, Penny? It's all a lie, Penny. It's all a lie. This is Photoshop. This woman is just trying to create problems and put us at odds. Penny stared at him, still not believing her eyes. Well, you can say that, but it's not true. There are timestamps and dates in the file, as well as a couple of videos that my team got from a cheap motel they use when the office is busy. The footage is blurry, but you'll get the idea. So, let's summarize. Mark's business is facing serious problems because the IRS is going to investigate his activities for several weeks. You didn't tell him that his own son wasn't really his, and Mark was cheating with his personal assistant, and you had no idea. Now you really understand what you've done to Joe. There was a brief pause of silence before Penny let out a sob. Let's clarify the situation. I have the ability to make things happen, but I'm choosing not to right now. One day of chaos is enough, I think. Penny, your only task is to tell Aaron the truth about who his real parents are. He may be confused, but he's young enough to adapt. Mark, you're essentially his father, As much as it pains me to admit it, even you, despite your flaws, will be a better father than none at all. So you'll stay involved and continue to care for him, or I'll find out why, understand?" Penny and Mark glared at April with open disdain. April smiled and stood up. "Well, is no one going to see me out?" Mark remained seated, but Penny stood up and lunged at April, shouting, "Bitte!" A reaction that surprised Mark, as he had never seen this side of Penny before, but didn't faze April at all. She stepped aside, allowing Penny to crash into the wall. Then she moved forward lightly but decisively, grabbed Penny by the shoulder and turned her around. She pinned Penny against the wall with her left hand and grabbed Penny by the throat with her right. "Mark, sit down," she shouted, glancing at Mark, who stood up and seemed ready to intervene. Mark's expression was one of uncertainty. "Penny and I are just going to have a chat, Mark." "Sit down," April repeated, hissing the words right in Penny's face. Penny, pinned against the wall, stared at April with wide eyes of fear. "Okay, listen carefully. I'm Joe's nemesis, and I've been meaning to do it for a long time. To be honest, you're lucky I didn't just demolish this place. You're lucky I'm taking care of your son, otherwise it would have been a lot worse today. I'm furious about the man you mistreated and deceived, and the reckoning will begin right now. If you piss me off anymore, you'll end up in the hospital and eating through a straw. Am I making myself clear?" Penny couldn't nod, so she tried to answer, "Yes, yes." "Good. I'll let you down now. Try anything else and you'll fly out the front window. Do you understand?" April released her, and Penny nodded as best she could. She pressed her hands to her throat where April's palm print was clearly visible. "I'm glad to hear that. And now, idiots, have a nice day. I'm leaving. Oh, and no, thankfully you're not in the will." With that, April grabbed her bag and left, slamming the door behind her, leaving Mark and Penny staring at each other, breathing heavily. Today, I launched my own business as part of my 5-year plan. Marianne helped me set everything up, and honestly, she's a lifesaver. She's like a therapist, life coach, and best friend all rolled into one. So I've started my own venture, doing the same work I did at Mercanos. But now I'm the boss. I'm hoping to bring over some of my old clients, but we'll see how that turns out. I'm not interested in any contact with people from my previous job. Most of them were aware of what was happening, and not a single person had the decency to tell me. I don't think I have any real friends there, and I don't need the added stress. I've moved into a small office on the west side. It's modest and needs some work and a fresh coat of paint, but it's affordable and it's mine, my new base of operations, so I'll have to get used to it. Setting up a business is a lengthy process with a lot of paperwork, but Sullivan Services is officially up and running. I've never been afraid of hard work, and that's not going to change now. By this time next year, I plan to be thriving, with a team of 20 people. Just wait. This is the beginning of a new chapter. I'm not going to dwell on Tara or the others from Mercanos. To hell with them. One day they might be seeking a job from me, and then I'll have a good laugh. I've read stories online about people in similar situations who go on to write bestsellers, get fit, compose music, or find other ways to achieve success after dealing with a cheating spouse. I'm not expecting that for myself, but maybe I can do well just by working for myself. Screw Mercanos. Who needs them? Tara Western hung up the phone and let out a heavy sigh. It had been a dreadful week overall. Her committee work was plagued by conflicts among the wealthy socialites on it. They had money, and all of them wanted to be in control. The boards of the 3 companies she served as an officer were also in disarray. One was struggling against a hostile takeover. Another was being crushed by a new startup offering similar services nearly for free, and the third was stagnating. It needed bold new leadership, but the 58-year-old CEO in place was clearly not up to the task. The stress was overwhelming, and Joe's death had also given her much to reflect on. She had been searching for him for so long, desperate to make amends as best as she could. She understood his reluctance. She had left him no choices, simply doing what she thought was best without considering the long-term impact on him, thinking, he'll get over it. Better to get it over with quickly than drag it out. Now that he was gone, so was her chance for any sort of absolution. The weight of this realization burdened her, and she had endured some terrible dreams over the past 2 nights. One night, she had spent hours with a bottle of wine, reflecting on her life's decisions and recognizing how flawed and one-sided most of them had been. She was exhausted, defeated, and had no idea how much worse things were about to become. The phone call had come from the front desk. The investigator woman was back and needed to see Tara. They'd put her in the conference room on the 2nd floor, the one with the golf course view. Tara grabbed a coffee and walked into the conference room, finding April already seated on one side. April didn't stand when Tara entered, which seemed a bit off, but Tara decided not to dwell on it. Her day was challenging enough without fixating on minor issues with someone she would likely never see again. She quickly took a seat, set down her coffee, and tried to muster a smile. "So, April, right? How can I assist you today? Have you made any progress in your investigation?" April simply stared back at her, seeming to appraise the entire scene, Tara, the room, even the color of her hair. A full minute of silence passed before April finally spoke. "Actually, yes. I found where he lived. I uncovered a lot of things, and I must say, Mrs. Western, I'm not impressed by any of them. I had no idea Joe had such unbelievably low standards for his wives. The whole morality and ethics of a street bum under the influence of illegal substances." There was a shocked silence as Tara struggled to grasp what she had just heard. Had this woman really just called her a girl of easy virtue? "I'm sorry, did you just—" Tara stammered. "Call you a girl of easy virtue? Yes, I did. Though I actually have more respect for a girl of easy virtues than for you. Most a girl of easy virtues I know are hard-working women who are upfront about their profession. I admire their honesty. But you're a sneaky, backstabbing bitch who makes all of us look bad. You slept with someone to get ahead and then had the nerve to claim you're in love. You're nothing but a girl of easy virtue, Tara, in every possible sense. Have you ever cared about anyone besides yourself?" "I'm genuinely curious," April said, her tone steady and her question sincere. I think I need to call security," Tara said, reaching for the phone. "Go ahead, Tara." "Call security. I'll leave without any fuss. But before you do, let me explain a few things about what's going to happen next." Tara held the phone in her hand, her finger hovering over the dial, but she didn't press any buttons. The woman in front of her spoke with a nonchalance that was both terrifying and mundane. It was frightening because this woman seemed unfazed by the gravity of her words. "Good. I have your attention. Let's lay everything out. First of all, I know everything you did to Joe. I know how he felt, what you did, how he tried to recover, and even about the business you tried to push his way. A pretty nasty little powerful version of merciful intimacy, wouldn't you say? Did you know Joe moved to a shack in the woods to escape you? You and that other woman. All because of what you did to him. I hope you're proud of yourself, and that what you gained was worth it. Although looking at your shiny new Mercedes, I'm sure it was for you. Too bad someone else paid for that, huh? Seems like that's been your whole life. Someone else footing the bill. Right up until your politically convenient marriage fell apart. How did it feel to experience what you did to Joe? Painful, was it? I bet for someone like you who craves control so desperately, it must have really stung. That's why you pushed that work Joe's way, wasn't it? A clumsy move on your part, but I understand why you did it. April was so chatty that Tara found herself just sitting there, engrossed in a profoundly unsettling way. April smiled and slid something across the table. Time for retribution. You owe the piper now. That's Joe's journal. Tara took the notebook and noticed a CD taped to the back page. She picked it up and flipped through a random page, trying to buy herself time to compose herself, while observing Joe's meticulous, spider-like handwriting. He never used cursive, claiming it was beyond his jarhead abilities. His regular handwriting was actually quite impressive, almost resembling print. This has everything in it. Names, dates, all of it, April said. What do you want me to do with it? Read it? Look, I'll be honest. I feel awful about all of this. But what can I do now? He's gone. I can't make it right. I'll have to live with what I did, and it's becoming increasingly clear that it's going to be harder and harder. Reading this, she said, pointing to the book, won't help or suddenly make me capable of fixing anything. On the contrary, April replied with a particularly unpleasant smile, it will do all that and more. Here's what's going to happen. I know you're on the board of Garin Publishing. They have a terrible CEO you want out, right? Tara nodded, astonished at how this girl had obtained such confidential information. This was known only to the board at that moment. Well, you're going to publish this, word for word. The CD contains a typed version. I thought you might want to see the original. It could be published as a handwritten journal if you like. Tara remained frozen in her seat. After a pause, she said, Did you say this name's names? I can't publish this. It would ruin me. April leaned forward, her voice dropping to a deliberate, measured tone. Let me make this perfectly clear, Mrs. Western. Your situation is already over. You just haven't come to terms with it yet. You are going to publish this exactly as it is, without changing a single word. I have multiple copies of the original, and if any alterations are made, your life will become even worse than it is now. Let's settle one thing right now. April grabbed her bag, took out her phone, and made a call. Hey, Jesse, connect me to Dermot, please. Thanks. As they waited, Tara flipped through the book, searching for mentions of her name while April held the phone to her ear. Dermot, it's me again. Yes, another case. This one is required as well. A forensic audit. Yes, a full IRS audit. Yes, a lesson needs to be taught. The name is Tara Western. She sits on the boards of several companies here in D.C. Yes, a thorough forensic audit. The kind that digs deep. Absolutely. I understand. Make it happen. Throughout the brief call, April kept her gaze fixed on Tara, who looked increasingly shocked as she realized what was happening. After ending the call, Tara felt compelled to respond. She was influential and not easily intimidated. She said, Listen, April, or whatever your name is, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not participating. Anyone can make phone calls and pretend to have connections with the IRS. Find someone more deserving to intimidate. There was a moment of silence before April, now visibly enraged and with a fierce intensity in her eyes, said, All right, Tara. I tried to stay calm, but I see how you provoke people. Know this, I work for a government agency, though I won't specify which one, because it's irrelevant. What matters is that I'm targeting you. I'm about to become the ultimate authority in your little world. To you, I'm the angel of death, like that lawyer in Florida, but much less forgiving. I have the power to ruin your life so thoroughly that you might end it yourself within 3 months. Believe me, I'm furious about what you did to Joe, and what I'm asking you to do now is nothing compared to what I will do if you don't comply. This isn't a threat, it's a fact. There was another pause. Tara was on the defensive, and when you're in that position, you try to buy time. I can't release this. If it's published with my name, it'll ruin me. I won't even have a chance to respond. My career ... Your career has been on life support since you ditched Joe. It just didn't realize it yet. It was only a matter of time before I showed up. Well, I'm here now, and you're finished. The only question is how badly you're finished. Your comfortable positions are over. So start coming to terms with that, because it's done. If you don't publish this, I'll take it to Robson Publishing. I'm sure they'd be eager to handle it. I'm giving you the chance to do it yourself, because it's better for you. You can publish this and retire from public life, or I'll legally tear you apart. It's your choice. Don't believe me? That's fine. Just wait 3 days and see what happens with the IRS. More silence. April paused, then made her appeal. In any good confrontation, there's a point where you highlight the victim's mistakes and offer them a way out. If done correctly, you might even get them to apologize for how they've been treated. April didn't expect that here. Tara was too grounded for that. But it could introduce a level of self-reflection that might be useful later. The thing is, I believe you'll go through with this. I think you'll do it because deep down, you realize what a terrible person you were to that man. He just wanted to make you happy. But what did you do? Moved up the ladder as quickly as you could. Was Joe just a starter husband? He loved you. He had no idea how cold you were. Are you still that cold, Tara? Or are you starting to see what you did and what you're responsible for? I think you are. I think you know that this is one of the few ways you can begin to atone for your actions. You know it. I know it. You don't need the money from these jobs. Let's face it, leaving Joe and marrying that VP did wonders for your finances. You're set for life. Tara sat there, flipping through the book without actually seeing the pages. She was fighting back tears, and though she heard April's words, her conscience, an ever-present voice lately, agreed with what was being said. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that I managed to get this published. What then? Is that the end? April let out a humorless laugh. Oh, we're far from finished, Tara. Very far. I have a few more things for you to do. Tara looked at April with a mix of dread and anticipation. You're going to take up a new hobby. You will collect blankets and clothes from dry cleaners with on-site lost and founds and donate them to homeless shelters. And you will do it yourself personally. That's what Joe was doing the night he... April hesitated for a moment before continuing. Saved my life. Someone needs to keep doing that, and now it's your turn, in that nice Mercedes of yours. You, Tara Western, are going to volunteer at a homeless shelter, serving food to those in need and getting your nice clothes dirty. You won't be on some committee of bored socialites who never get close to those who actually need help. You'll be right there, hands-on, and I'll be watching. All the damn time. Tara swallowed hard. Let's see, what else? Oh yes, you'll set up a scholarship in Joe's name, with your own money. You'll put over $300,000 into it. It will go to the most deserving members of the working poor who can't afford to send their children to college. Tara placed the book on the table and leaned on it to steady her trembling hands. Oh, and you're going to establish a college fund for a particular young man. Joe didn't know he had a son. The woman he had him with kept it a secret and lied to him. There's been significant damage that was long overdue. But if you ever cared about Joe, if you ever loved him, which I doubt, you'll do this. Make sure that kid has a future. A stunned silence followed, broken by Tara, who said, trembling, He has a son? What's his name? Where is he? Is he with that Penny woman? I'll strangle her with her own hair. He has a kid? He never knew? Oh, God. Oh, my God. Tara began to cry, sobbing uncontrollably. April, normally inclined to help, held back, understanding that Tara needed this harsh reality to get back on track. April let Tara cry for 3 minutes before sharply saying, Tara, that kid needs you to look out for him, okay? Stop crying. You can do that later. Now, do you understand what I'm saying? Did you get it?" Tara nodded miserably, searching for a tissue. April noticed and handed her one from her own bag. As Tara wiped her eyes, wondering about her appearance, her mascara probably smudged, April continued, "Make no mistake, you will do these things. Not just because I'm telling you to, though that's reason enough, but because you know it's the right thing to do. It's time for you to face up to what you've done and deal with the consequences. It's time to pay, Tara, and you know it." The two women stared at each other in silence for a moment. Then Tara blinked, nodded, and simply said, "Okay. And one more thing. Your ex. We need to address him too. Beyond what he's done to you, though you do deserve that. He needs to pay for what he did to Joe. You were married and he went after you anyway. Besides your own betrayal, it takes two to tango. He'll get what's coming to him. I won't let it go." Tara nodded again with a bit more resolve this time. "I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear yours first. Not right now. Take some time to think about it, though I'm sure you've already done so. For now, read the book and prepare it for publication. I'll return later to discuss it. As for the IRS situation, it's going to happen. But you deserve it, and you need to understand that I'm serious. Don't obstruct me or fail to follow my instructions, or things will go even worse for you. I'm your worst nightmare, Tara, a cunning and resourceful woman who currently despises you for what you did to a good man. Never forget that." After a brief silence, Tara took a deep breath and said to April, "I honestly thought we were on the same page back then. I didn't really understand. We used to sit around and talk about our future and what we wanted. We both had dreams. He knew mine, and I knew his. I just thought, this is where we're headed. This is what we want. I made my dreams come true. He didn't. I genuinely thought that since I was making things happen for myself, he would understand. I knew it would hurt him, but it would be over quickly and eventually he'd get it. It was all about business, pursuing what you want. I believed that what we said we wanted was truly what we wanted. If his dream had come up, he would have seized it too. I would have accepted that." Tara realized she was rambling and didn't quite understand why she felt compelled to explain this to April. April sat there, contemplating how far she should go with Tara. Tara needed help, and April could provide it, but she was reluctant. She was furious and felt ready to tear Tara apart if necessary, yet professionalism prevailed. "No, you wouldn't have, Tara. You think you would, but you've separated ambition and desire from reality and emotional truth. You say you would have understood because that's the response you anticipated, needed, from Joe. It's what you needed to believe in order to justify your betrayal and abandonment of him. If he had done it to you, you wouldn't have understood. And deep down, you knew he would never do that to you. That's why it's easy to claim I would have understood, and even believe the lie, because it was never going to happen. On some subconscious level, you know this. The reality is you measured your relationship with Joe against your ambition and the paths you saw to achieve it, and it just didn't measure up. This wasn't a case of what he doesn't know won't hurt him. There was no other possible outcome than what you chose. It was cold, calculated, and inevitable. There's nothing more to say about it. As for what it reveals about you, I've said my piece. I suspect you've been coming to your own realizations recently. The truth is, you are who you are, and nothing could have saved your marriage to Joe. You ended it with ruthless efficiency. Tara broke down and sobbed again, managing to say through her tears, I really did love him. I did. I let him go because I thought it was the best thing. Neither of us was going to get what we wanted together. Tara, did it ever occur to you that what he wanted was simply you? The dreams you talked about were additions to the relationship, not replacements. At least not for him. He already had what he wanted. It's just you who's the greedy one." With that, April stood up, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door, observing Tara silently heaving in her chair. She paused at the door of the conference room and remarked, "Nice blouse, by the way." My new therapist, Mary Ann Thomas, has suggested that I keep a journal, claiming it's therapeutic. I'm not entirely convinced, but given how chaotic things are right now, I'm willing to try anything that might help. So, I guess I should start with some background. I'm Julian Sullivan, but my friends call me Joe. I was known as Jules in school, but I was eager to leave that behind. I served in the Army during the original Desert Storm, but was discharged due to an injury. I consider myself fortunate because my commanding officer initially wanted to kick me out with a dishonorable discharge for desertion of post. He couldn't grasp that I left my post to arm the nurses and doctors in the hospital we were defending. We were facing the real possibility of being overrun, and I wanted to give them a fighting chance. The local warlord wasn't about to show them any mercy. Educated women? They'd be the first against the wall. I was injured because I went out after the initial attack to collect AK-47s and pistols from fallen enemies to arm those inside. But that's all in the past, not worth dwelling on now. I have plenty of other things to be upset about. I'm 32 years old. I still follow some Army habits: running, swimming, working out, and staying in shape. I wake up early and take responsibility seriously. Until 2 weeks ago, I was making a name for myself at Mercanos, where I've worked for the past 5 years. Mercanos is a local conglomerate that designs and builds doctors' offices, and I was part of the design team. I met my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, at Mercanos. She was part of the design group management, and I was captivated by her from the moment I laid eyes on her. I don't know if it was love at first sight or just LS8, but it was powerful. Tara Barron was a tall and stunning woman with long, flowing brown hair, pale skin, and striking blue eyes. She was not only beautiful, but also very efficient, smart, and agile. She often wore tight skirts and tights. Perhaps this is too much information, but I appreciated her choice of stockings, which I have used over the years, like others. By the time we met, Tara had worked at Mercanos for 18 months and was already showing signs of frustration, feeling limited by the glass ceiling despite her passion for work. She was unhappy with the lack of promotion opportunities and the leadership standing over her. Nevertheless, we found solace in each other. On Fridays, we would relax at the bar, discussing the obstacles we faced and bonding over our shared frustrations. Tara was flirtatious, albeit in a slightly restrained manner. I had to be perceptive to catch her humor, but I managed to do it. Often at a meeting, she would make a remark that others ignored and try not to look at me so that we both wouldn't laugh out loud. Soon our relationship turned to intimacy. It was traditional, but incredibly satisfying. We decided to get married after 9 months of dating, 3 months after we started living together. Our relationship developed quickly, but it was our nature to see what we wanted, make decisions, and move forward. It was a happy time, and I was deeply in love with her, amazed that she felt the same way about me. We were ready to conquer the world together. That's all we've been doing for 4 years. It was wonderful until it was finally over. I was completely caught off guard. I didn't expect this to happen at all. I was just living my life, working and having fun. I didn't notice any obvious signs. No decrease in intimacy, no late nights on her part, no major changes. Maybe there were these signs, but I missed them. I can endlessly convince myself, but that doesn't change the fact that I was stunned. One Friday evening, she didn't come home. I tried to call her on her cell phone, one of the early Motorola models. There was no answer. She didn't come back all weekend, and I was desperate. I even went to the police. Then on Sunday evening, she just walked in as if nothing had happened and said the last thing any man would want to hear. "We need to talk." She told me that she was visiting our boss, Peter Western. She was doing a test drive while living with him. They've been dating for the last 3 months. She claimed that she had to overcome the glass ceiling, and she believed that a relationship with him was the best way to achieve this. She said she loves me, but she doesn't think I can help her achieve her goals. I couldn't find the words. I was shocked. I had no idea she was capable of such a thought process. Obviously, I didn't know her as well as I thought I did. Maybe it's my fault or hers that she hid her career ambitions so well. We used to make fun of him together, but now she was with him and planned to marry him. But first, she intended to squander our savings because she felt entitled. I didn't even know what to say. Well, I did, but I wasn't going to resort to physical confrontation. I mean, I couldn't even ask her why because she had already explained. I couldn't give her what he could give, and because of her loyalty to me, she ended our marriage. I noticed that she confessed that she had been with him for several months. That's all loyalty to you. It seemed like she just wanted to marry him, and I was standing in her way. Marianne invited me to share my feelings here. To be honest, I was overwhelmed with surprise, anger, confusion, stupor, fear, and disappointment, all at once. There were no hints, nothing that could have prepared me. It all just came out of nowhere. When I showed up for work on Monday, my obnoxious boss was waiting at my desk, worried that I might be misinterpreting the situation and turning the workplace into an unpleasant environment. Damn right I was. What exactly was I supposed to think? It was clear he just wanted me to keep quiet and not make any trouble. Well, screw that. I wondered if he even realized the mercenary reasons she had for being with him. But why should I clue him in? Let him figure it out the hard way. Jerk. Naturally, I went to HR and his superior. They didn't give a damn. There wasn't any morality clause in the policy. After 3 days, they finally got back to me, saying it was unfortunate but that they didn't have a no-staff fraternization policy or a morality clause, so they were just going to stay out of it. Tough luck. Basically, someone weighed the importance of a single designer against a design group manager and her VP boss, and decided it was more practical to ignore it. They apologized and said it was unfortunate. They even admitted that he was a scumbag for stealing my wife, but that's just the way it goes in the city. Sorry. Over those 3 days, several people came up to me to say, sorry. They all wanted to speak to me, which meant they knew about the situation before I did. Apparently, this drama was unfolding during work hours while I was busy in the design lab, actually doing my job. Not a single person had said anything to me. The guys I worked with avoided making eye contact. They knew, and not one of them had the guts to speak up. When HR said they wouldn't take any action, I quit immediately. Clearly, I couldn't keep working there. As I was packing up, Tara showed up and told me I was being foolish, reacting impulsively rather than thinking things through. She insisted there was enough space at Mercanos for both of us. She was sorry, but it was happening, and I should make the best of it. She even had the nerve to ask if I understood how she felt, the difficult decisions she had to make, and how tough it had been. She said that in any case, someone loses out. I tried to point out that she put herself in that situation. If she hadn't seduced the boss to get ahead, she wouldn't have had to make that choice, and I wouldn't be the one suffering. But I think that logic was too much for her to handle. Admitting that would mean acknowledging she was manipulative and had discarded me for the next job promotion. She has no idea what I'm feeling or why. Not a clue. I'm still shocked that I never saw this side of her. I must be a fool. I guess love really is blind. I had no inkling. I told her she was a stupid bitch and that I wanted nothing to do with her or her jerk of a boyfriend. I made some threats about watching their backs, though I wouldn't have done anything, having seen enough vile sea in my life. It was all I had left, just to scare them a bit. It got me a visit from the police the next day, but it's their word against mine. Screw them. I spent a long weekend with Manny in Wisconsin, mostly drunk, and he suggested I see a therapist. When I returned, I did, and she said this was the first step in regaining my poise. What a term. Poise. I didn't think anyone still used that word. I thought it was outdated. So here I am, writing this, trying to express the unbelievable betrayal I feel from my wife, who chose her career over love. Or was it even love? How can it be if she can just abandon it like that? Either she can shut off her emotions, or she's a cold-hearted person. Probably both. The funeral took place on a dreary fall day. It had rained earlier that morning, leaving the grass still damp. The sky was overcast with dark, heavy clouds threatening more rain, though it thankfully held off, for which April was thankful. She had arrived early at Arlington National Cemetery. Julian Sullivan, a veteran, was to be buried there, and April had spent the day on the phone with various government agencies to ensure this would happen. She had no idea where else he might be buried if they refused, so she simply wouldn't accept their initial rejections. Accompanied by Max on a new leash, who kept trying to wander off, April had to tug the leash several times to remind him that this was not a time for play. April had sent a few emails about the funeral details, but hadn't expected anyone else to show up besides herself and the priest she had hired. She was taken aback when a black limousine arrived, and out stepped Tara Western, née Sullivan, dressed in black and carrying a red rose. April deliberately avoided looking at her. Then another car pulled up, revealing Penny Glasso and her son, Aaron. This was another unexpected development. No Mark, though, perhaps for the best. Dermot soon arrived, escorting both Jessica Ingrams and Desiree. Desiree gave April a quick kiss on the cheek and whispered, "Megan wanted to be here, but she's still in the field. She's thinking of you and will visit when she returns." After that, a group of nuns arrived, accompanied by several women who seemed down on their luck. One of the nuns was familiar to April. She recognized her as the one she had spoken with at the homeless shelter. Next, a few cars with West Virginia plates pulled up, which April guessed were from people connected to Joe's past in Charlestown. Sarah Atwood arrived with a few older women, each supporting the others. April mentally labeled them the Joe Sullivan for Sainthood Brigade. Marianne Dubowski showed up, looking quite stylish. April noticed Marianne giving a nod to Jessica Ingrams, who returned the gesture. April made a mental note to investigate this connection later, realizing that Marianne knew Jessica. A van then pulled up, and about 20 older, rugged men emerged, some of whom were clearly injured, missing legs or an arm. April was concerned as she had only ordered 20 chairs, thinking she'd be there alone. Now, there was barely any room to stand. Ambrose Hillier arrived, looking more polished than she had seen him before. To her surprise, a short man with curly hair and a fedora, whom she didn't recognize, approached her. "Hi, I'm Manny Trusso. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you did." He gestured to Hillier, who smiled awkwardly. "I want to thank you. You got him justice for those women." He indicated the two women sitting next to each other, trying to ignore each other's presence. "May I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the chair next to her. She nodded, and as he took a seat, he added, "We can talk later. There are stories about Julian you need to hear." The hearse from Slow Trail Funeral Home arrived. April had arranged and paid for the funeral expenses, considering it a small but necessary gesture. The men from the van approached the hearse and politely but firmly informed the funeral home staff that they would handle the pallbearing duties. At the same time the hearse arrived, to her utter surprise, a squad of Marines showed up, complete with their weapons. The lead sergeant gave a nod to Manny, and the squad fell into formation. Manny leaned in and whispered, "The military takes care of its own. That sergeant is alive because of Joe. He's from the Cambridge crew. I'll explain more later." The funeral proceeded slowly and quietly until the Marines performed a 21-gun salute. They draped the coffin with a flag, folded it, and presented it to Aaron, who received it with tears. Max, straining at his leash and whining, eventually broke free and dashed to the table where the coffin was placed. He lay down beneath it, as if he knew where his master was and just wanted to be close, as loyal dogs do. It touched everyone present deeply. April couldn't bring herself to call him back. After the funeral, April asked Ambrose to speak and announce a gathering at a nearby Irish pub close to Arlington. April couldn't bring herself to speak. She was still too angry with nearly everyone. Many who had come to pay their last respects to Joe had been notably absent in showing him respect while he was alive. At the pub gathering, April pulled Ambrose over to where Tara was sampling the wine and clearly not enjoying it, and not being very discreet about it. Max was at the bar, and some of the attendees were amusing themselves by adding a bit of beer to his water dish. He kept glancing around, clearly searching for someone. "Ambrose, I'm not sure if you've met Tara. She was Joe's first wife. She has something she'd like to say to you." Hillier looked at Tara skeptically. She was tall and had a demeanor that often seemed condescending. Right now, however, she was struggling to be genuine. She looked around for a place to put down the wine, eventually choosing the mantelpiece. "Yes, well, April has told me everything you did for Julian, how you didn't give up, how you found his hideout, and how you managed to get the Marines to come to this funeral. I want you to know that Julian would have liked you. He admired tenacious people. I wish you could have known him. He was the finest man I ever met." She sniffled and wiped her nose with the napkin from her drink. "I was such an idiot, completely consumed by work and my career, never realizing what I had right in front of me." She sighed and shook her head, clearly still embarrassed. "Anyway, I wanted to ask if maybe you'd consider having dinner with me. I understand you've had similar experiences." Hillier glanced at April, who smiled in response. The smile faded slightly and became a bit strained as he simply stared at her. "So this is the Tara, huh? The one who messed up our guy?" Tara sniffed again and turned away, muttering, "I told you this was a bad idea." Turning back, she said, "Look, yes, I was a jerk. I've learned. You clearly haven't. Forget it. I thought, never mind. Just forget it." She started to walk away, but April said sharply, "Stop right there, Tara." Tara stiffened and stopped, though she didn't turn around. "And you, Hillier, do you think you're so special that you can afford to be rude to someone who took a chance? What a jerk. No wonder your relationships have been so disappointing. Look at you. You look like a mess and you act even worse. What have you got to lose? Look at her. She's beautiful, successful, and she's learned some tough lessons. Do you think you have nothing to learn? For crying out loud, when will you realize that everyone needs to take a chance sometimes? Both of you disgust me because you're too clueless to see it. I'm going to get a drink." April stalked off without looking back, struggling to keep a smug expression off her face. Hillier and Tara both looked uncomfortable. Tara kept her back turned, and Hillier didn't know where to direct his gaze, so he stared at his beer. After a while, Tara asked, "Has she left?" Hillier grunted in response. Tara turned around, her face tense. She glanced around to see if anyone had noticed. No one seemed to be paying attention. She picked up her wine from the mantel to occupy herself. They stood close together, drinking in silence, but not close enough to feel connected. Then Hillier remarked, "She's right, you know. I'm damaged goods. One failed marriage because of work and not being able to focus on anything but casework." Tara smiled and said, "I can relate. We're both in the same boat." Hillier sighed. "I make hasty judgments. I don't get home on time. I have a pile of scumbags I need to deal with, and I don't sleep well." "Oh yeah?" Tara responded. "That's nothing. I work all hours, have a phone glued to me, and my best friend is a vibrator. I also work from home, and apparently I snore." "That's child's play," Hillier countered. "I have guns hidden all over my apartments. I intentionally leave the hallway messy with noisy stuff so I can hear people coming. I eat blended pizza for breakfast, and I haven't had a suit dry cleaned in a month." "Oh, really? You think you're all that? I bet I can outdrink you, too." "Oh, come on, be realistic," Hillier shot back. "I can outdrink a skinny person like you any day." "Fine. You think so? Let's see. Hossack's Bar Wednesday. I'll have my driver ready so neither of us has to drive. Get ready to be outdone by a woman, Mr. Hillier." "Fine. Fine, then." They stood there, sipping their drinks, puzzled by what had just transpired. Across the room, April was at the bar, gazing into the mirror at the two of them and smiling to herself. On paper, everything had seemed perfect, but you never really knew until you brought two people together. "Miss Carlyle?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Manny holding his fedora in his hand. "Hi there. Manny, right? One of Julian's army friends?" "Yes, ma'am. I'd like you to meet a few people. This is John Graves. John was one of the lookouts at the Cambridge event, and he and Joe go way back. This fellow here, who could use a shave, is Sal Samry. Sal was in the hospital with me in Kuwait. All of these guys were part of the Cambridge event." "Show her, guys." They all rolled up their sleeves, revealing the same tattoo. "Ma'am," said one of the men, "we know what you did. We just wanted to thank you and give you this." Another man handed her a t-shirt with the Cambridge tattoo and motto. "We figured you probably wouldn't want the tattoo yourself, but since you're one of us now, we thought you should have this." April was at a loss for words. After a moment she managed to say, "One of you?" "Absolutely. Joe Sullivan saved you too. That makes you part of the Cambridge crew." "I dot." April was genuinely unsure how to respond. "I don't deserve this. I really don't. I never even got to thank him." "Well, as Joe used to say, as long as there are people willing to do those things, you never have to," Manny said. April broke into a sincere smile. "All right, drinks are definitely on me. Who wants one? Someone mentioned Joe's stories? I'd love to hear them. And don't count me out on the tattoo just yet. I might need to find the right spot for it." An American Life, once published, achieved quiet success. It topped the New York Times bestseller list for 2 weeks and gained further acclaim when Oprah featured it as one of her favorite things. It became required reading at several prestigious colleges, but so far, no one has sought to acquire the movie rights. All profits from the book were reinvested into the Julian Sullivan Foundation, managed by Tara Western, which is dedicated to providing scholarships for aspiring writers, with a preference for those from the armed forces. After An American Life was published and promoted by Oprah, even the President of the U.S. took notice, mentioning Joe Sullivan during that year's State of the Union address. The President described Joe Sullivan as the kind of quiet American hero who helps others without ever seeking recognition, even in the toughest conditions, on which this country is built. The military launched an investigation into the Cambridge event, resulting in Joe Sullivan being posthumously awarded the Purple Heart and the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions that day. His son, Aaron, was brought to Washington to accept the awards. Additionally, Manny and some of his team received Medals of Valor, and the Army's top general issued a public apology for having overlooked the incident for so long. But it didn't end there. Joe Sullivan's commanding officer at the time, retired 2-star General James Patterson, a frequent CNN commentator, was invited to participate in a debate on military injustice. During the debate, He was thoroughly criticized by the other three panelists, all of whom were military veterans. Unable to justify why he had penalized the involved personnel, CNN terminated his contract. Quietly, the military retroactively downgraded his rank to colonel. 3 weeks after the publication of American Life, 3 of the 4 designers working for Mark Glasso resigned en masse. All were married and did not want Glasso around. When Glasso protested that he was a happily married man and that they had nothing to fear from him, they responded, "Yeah, I'm sure Joe Sullivan thought the same." 2 weeks later, 85% of his clients had canceled their orders. Glasso, now staying at a Best Western after being kicked out by Penny once evidence of his infidelity surfaced, was suddenly hit with 3 lawsuits simultaneously. The first was for alienation of affection from the husband of his personal assistant. The second was related to the divorce of the same couple. And the third was for failing to enforce his company's rulebook on interpersonal relationships. He was stunned to discover that his company's bylaws and rulebook did in fact contain such a clause. When he left Joe Sullivan's employment, Mark had taken everything he could, clients, his wife, and even Joe's bylaws and rulebook. He hadn't given it much thought at the time, just a quick glance to ensure it seemed suitable, renamed the company heading, and used it. He wondered how they had discovered that specific clause, but then remembered that the book An American Life had mentioned it. He had been undone by Joe Sullivan's trap. The IRS uncovered several discrepancies in his bookkeeping. Although the inconsistencies were minor, combined with the loss of designers and clients, they were enough to drive the company to the brink of collapse. Just 3 days before declaring bankruptcy, he received an offer of $32,000 for the company, a sum he couldn't ignore. He had no choice but to accept. The company was acquired by the Julian Sullivan Foundation and rebranded as Sullivan's Designs. The 3 designers who had quit were offered their positions back. 2 accepted, while the 3rd had already found another job. Sullivan's Designs is now the preferred design group for Mercanos. Peter Western was discovered in a motel in Sweetwater, Texas, 4 months later. Sweetwater is a small town located near Abilene. He couldn't explain why he was there. He woke up after drinking beer all night at a hotel bar in Fort Worth. Although he wasn't robbed, he had wounds all over his body. It took him a week to realize that he could no longer maintain his masculine physical ability. The medical staff were puzzled by his condition, as if it had been done intentionally. Hector Gonzalez was never located, either in Mexico or Paraguay. It is noteworthy that soon after the death of Julian Sullivan, a new employee appeared in an elite brothel in Bogotá, Colombia. This male employee took up residence in the pain room, a specialized room for people with strange inclinations. The occupants of this room rarely stayed long, and the room often involved bloodshed. It required a highly masochistic person to willingly be a victim in that space. This particular man lasted longer than the others before he was found unconscious 3 months later. He crashed into a mirror, smashed it. There were rumors that he might have been given illegal substances or that he was there against his will. However, given that part of the thrill for those who exploited the people in Payne's room was their resistance, it was difficult to determine whether it was sincere or not. Whatever it was, it increased the excitement of the users of the room. Many sadists who tortured this man talked about his mania, describing his rabid eyes. They were interested in numerous copies of a photograph depicting a man in American combat gear in the desert, which were hung all over the room so that employees of an illegal business could constantly see them. The brothel owner simply shrugged her shoulders and explained that this was a condition of his employment. The body was buried in a shallow grave and was never mentioned again. Aaron Glasso took the first opportunity to change his name to Aaron Sullivan. One Saturday, Manny and his team visited him, wanting to invite him out and tell stories about his father. When Penny initially refused, Manny talked to her quietly in the kitchen for 10 minutes, and after that she never stopped him from meeting with the Cambridge team. Whenever they were in the city, they took him to museums or other similar places and told him stories. April also joined them when she was off duty. She put the cabin at the disposal of any crew member who asked for it, and it was often used. She was sure Joe would appreciate it. Tara Western retired just days before the release of An American Life, having first agreed with April that she would be allowed to do so, with the Cambridge crew taking over her responsibilities at the local homeless shelter. She moved to Austin, Texas, where she purchased a market gardening farm specializing in palm and fruit trees, sold at Lowe's and Home Depot. Tara also began volunteering at local homeless shelters. Despite April's insistence on her commitment, Tara stayed true to her pledge. Hillier also retired to Austin, and Tara married him as soon as she could, partly to change her last name. Whenever Ambrose Hillier was upset with her, he called her Mrs. Sullivan, which always made her pause and reflect. They make an effort to stay in touch with April, inviting her every year to their annual 4th of July and Thanksgiving parties, but she never attends. She remains angry and isn't ready to see Tara content. Although she recognizes her reaction as unprofessional, she can't help it.